Hey everyone, today we're going to take a look at the Marvel Legends Dracula 6-inch action figure. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the super thanks button. I do appreciate all engagement on my channel. Now, I initially wanted to pass on reviewing this figure, but having it in hand and messing around with it, it's certainly worth taking a closer look at this one. He comes with 2 spare fists, a sword, and an alternate head. And there's also a lot of new tooling on him. His first accessory is a sword that is cast in a silver looking plastic. There's interesting serrated edges on the blade, as well as a very uniquely shaped hilt with black paint on the grip. And because he only comes with one gripping hand on his right side, that's the only way he can hold his sword. The other hand is a relaxed grip with a finger splayed, so there's actually no way of him holding to his sword on his left hand. He comes with 2 alternate fists, and these are cast in a red plastic and they've got armor sculpted on them, with interesting detail like those plates on his knuckles and on his fingers. But on the inside it looks a little weird. You can see over here how his last finger looks a little mangled, almost as if it wasn't cut correctly from the mold. The 2 fists come with hinges and are articulated in and out, and popping onto the figure just fine, so you have different ways of displaying him. And finally he comes with an alternate head. But let's take a closer look at this one together with his default head sculpt later on. In terms of Dracula's overall sculpt and paint, he does look quite impressive, simply because Marvel Legends has a ton of reuse. But on this figure, there's a lot of new sculpting. The only parts that I think are reused are his thighs, which are from the Wonder Man or Grim Reaper mold. Everything else appears to be new. The only thing that stands out to me as looking a little tacky are the red armored parts. There's a lot of detail sculpted on these armored parts, from the weathered pitted look to the segments in the armor. However, it's all bare red plastic and looks a little tacky, especially when looking at the figure as a whole. When we zoom into the armored parts, you can see the good sculpting work later on. He's also got a pretty sizable cape, but somehow Hasbro has casted this one a little thin and flexible, so it really doesn't mess with the balance of the figure. There's sculpted detail on the cape, with the fabric texture, tattered ends, and a couple of folds. And because it's thin and flexible, you can actually move it out of the way as you articulate his arms, and you also have the option, looking at some of the promotional pictures, to kind of curve it and have it floating. So for those of you who are against soft fabric capes, this one adds a level of playability not usually seen on thick, rigid Hasbro plastic capes. I can say that I love both his head sculpts. There are different expressions, so you do get a very good bit of options in choosing the expression you want on his face. Both are cast in a white plastic, and the sculpted detail really comes through, particularly in the deep set eyes, the wrinkles on his forehead, as well as the lines in his face, all being brought out by subtle shading. Colors for his eyebrows and his red eyes are also very neatly and sharply applied. On his snarling face, you also do see his very well-defined fangs, once again also sharply painted in white, and it stands out against the pink inside his mouth. What I do like about his screaming, snarling face is how his nose is kind of pulled up, and you can see the furrowing in his brows, so this head sculpt looks convincingly like it's snarling or screaming. Sometimes when the lines in the face appear soft and not defined, a screaming head sculpt could quickly be interpreted as a yawning one. Both head sculpts also have the earrings painted on in gold paint, pointy ears on both of the head sculpts as well. The hair sculpt on the head is also the same, white plastic with a nice grey wash to bring out all the lines in the textures of the hair. So what is cool about Dracula also is that both heads also have different style of ponytails. The default calm one has a neater ponytail, while the screaming head has a larger and messier ponytail. So these are pegged into the back of his head and they do swing around, and that means they're also swappable. Just pop and swap, no heat is needed, and you can get this bigger bushy ponytail onto his calm head. Naturally, the snarling head sculpt also pops onto the figure just fine and looks great with that big bushy ponytail flailing in the wind. Or you can pop on a neater ponytail to have him snarling indoors. His chest armor has very nice sculpted detail. You can see all the segments and the lines clearly sculpted. There's also dings and dents, and it also has a pitted look. However, because it's a plain red plastic, that detail doesn't stand out from far away. It really needs a dark wash to bring out all that good work in the sculpting. He's also got a metallic silver piece of plastic that's sculpted over here, looking like a chain and clasp for his cape. We've got a red plastic for his lower torso as well, with dark grey paint for the middle of his outfit. He's sculpted with baggy sleeves over here. This one only comes with a single hinge, and there's sculpting work on the hinge as well, looking and feeling a little bit like Star Wars Black Series. This single hinge actually does get you good range, and we'll see it in the articulation section. However, the way that it's sculpted means that it looks a little ugly when it's mid-bend. You can see how that hinge actually sticks out from the rest of the sculpt. For his forearm armor, they are also sculpted in that red plastic. Similarly good work with the pitting and dings and dents, but once again also not standing out because of the lack of a black wash. This armor also is sculpted with spikes down the back, looking very sinister. So this armor blends in quite well with the baggy sleeves, and it does come with a swivel just after that hinge. However, when you swivel and turn it, it starts to look a little weird. So I guess we should keep it with the spikes facing backward. And look at his outfit beneath that cape. We see that same good work on the armor on the back, and the same red plastic and the dark grey paint on his lower torso. There's very neat line work. On his legs we see the similar treatment with the red plastic for most of his legs and the dark grey paint applied reasonably sharp. And we see the same nice segmented sculpt in the armor on his calves as well. These are embellished with the spikes down the sides as well as on the knee pads. And what's an interesting bit of detail over here is also how there are spikes on his ankle. So these are sculpted with a swivel just above the ankle, and that's an additional point of articulation, which is much appreciated because we don't see that much on Marvel Legends. Now onto his feet, and we see nice detail once more, with the dings and dents on top of the armor of his shoe. And that all finishes with the pointy tip on his shoe. So overall, there's a ton of new sculpting on this figure. We also see paint on his legs, which is a rarity for Hasbro. And overall, the dark greys and the reds of his outfit do look quite uniform across the different shades of the paint and plastics. Coupled with the hits of silver on his chest as well as the gold in his earrings, this entire figure actually has quite a bit of thought that has gone into its design. And that's why I decided to review this and have a closer look at all the good work. For articulation, his head is on a double ball dumbbell joint, so you do get some sideways wiggle. He does also turn all the way 360. However, you do get quite limited looking down, just that much, and not a lot going upwards. So this is my first joint modification idea. He's got a swivel hinge at his shoulders, so he does go up as well as back. And you can see how light and flexible that cape is, not getting in the way of posing his arms. Upper bicep swivel for 360 spin. Single hinged elbows, and you can see that he still gets beyond 90 degrees of bend, which is great, even though those sleeves are really baggy. As we saw earlier, there is a swivel over here, but that kind of messes with the sculpt and silhouette of the figure. Swivel hinge at the wrist going 360 and in and out. On his sword holding hand, that hinge goes down and up. He's got a ball joint at his mid-torso, so he does go 360, getting a decent bit of tilting that goes sideways. He's okay bending backwards, and that's fine. However, bending forward is very limited. So this is gonna be my second joint modification idea. Ball joints at the hips that go a very impressive split for Dracula. No problems forward and backward as well. Side swivel for 360 spin. Double hinge at the knees with the pins concealed, and he also gets very good range. Swivel at the bottom of his calf armor, so his foot spins 360. Ankle tilt that goes up, and if you want to push it beyond that armored spiky piece, that's more range, as well as going downwards. And a generous ankle pivot that goes out as well as in. Having a look at the limited ball joint at his neck, and we can see exactly why that's the case. There's not a lot of range because of how small that hole is, so there's barely any wiggle in it. And now to modify that torso ball joint, we're just gonna have to bend him backwards all the way, noting the highest point of that upper torso armored piece. I'm gonna mark out in pencil, and this will be where any removal of plastic on that lower torso shouldn't go beyond. So that way, when we put him back together and he's bent backwards, you wouldn't see any gaps in that joint. So here's the first modification complete. You can use a hobby knife. I'm just using an old Swiss Army knife. And just cut out two C-shaped pieces of plastic, one from the front of that neck ball joint and the other on the back, cutting it out like so. And now you can see that there's a lot more range in that ball joint going forward and backward. As a result, he gets much better range looking downward now. Since I didn't cut beyond that ball joint, I did not sacrifice the sculpt of the neck outside of that joint. So this gap is resulting from the default sculpt already, and that's the only downside of having more range looking downward. And here we are getting him to look upward much better as well. So this improved range is pretty obvious, especially when you compare it with the original state. And now the upper torso is made of a softer plastic, and using a hairdryer to heat this up, getting it soft and pliable, and we can pop it off the peg, and you will see that the lower torso has a soft plastic overlay for his armor. I will first cut out a C-shaped piece of plastic from the top of that armor, and then we'll go to work removing plastic on the harder plastic of the lower torso over here at the front of the joint. And we'll do that using a rotary grinding tool or Dremel. So using the same hobby knife, I first removed plastic from that top armor overlay. Using a rotary grinding tool or Dremel, I removed that much material from the front of that torso ball joint. And slipping the soft plastic armor piece back on, you will notice that I removed much more material on the hard plastic lower torso compared to the armored piece. And you can see that much more obvious from the top view. That's to give the ball joint more forward bending range, while the soft armor piece also covers up the removed plastic from that lower torso. Heating the upper torso and popping the figure back together. Now let's have a look at that improved torso ab crunch. Now he's definitely got much better range compared to the original. And with this improved forward ab crunch, it's now clear that he would also need that improved upward neck range. And this is where we can reap the full benefit of it. And having him crunched all the way forward, as you can see, there's no gap in that torso ball joint. And now bending him backward all the way. Likewise, no visible gaps in that armor from the front, even when you twist him. And the highest point of where the upper torso armor ends, we still don't see a gap in that ball joint. With the improved mid-torso ball joint, he can now pull off quite a decent super villain landing. That cape just looking a little awkward, since it's just sculpted in one pose. And pulling off a decent jump scare pose as well, with him snarling and in a wider action stance. And here he is in an all-out action stance, very expressive with that screaming hit, and looking quite dynamic with the range in his torso. Dracula stands at about 6 5/8 of an inch, and that's about 17 centimeters. For size comparisons, here he is with Spider-Man, Thor, Black Knight, and Wolverine. And here he is with Doctor Doom, Morbius, Bloodstorm, and Blade. And for comparisons with other lines, here he is with G.I. Joe Classified series. I'm pleasantly surprised by how well Dracula turned out. Coming with an almost entirely newly sculpted body, alternate head and hands, he's only lacking a black wash to bring out the details in his weathered armor. With the torso mod, he's so much more fun to pose. Dracula is the best individual figure in this wave, hands down. Please like and share this video, let me know what you think in the comments below, subscribe to my channel, and hit the super thanks button. Thanks for watching, take care, and stay safe.